Book of Job, the story that will change how you see suffering. A biblical narrative that challenges everything you think you know about pain, faith, and divine justice. The man who had everything in the ancient land of Uz, there lived a man whose name would echo through the corridors of eternity. His name was Job, a name that would become synonymous with both unimaginable suffering and unwavering faith. This was not just any man. Job was blameless and upright, a man who feared God and turned away from evil with every fiber of his being. Picture this. Job possessed 7,000 sheep that dotted the hillsides like clouds against the green earth. 3,000 camels carried his wealth across desert trade routes. 500 yoke of oxen plowed his vast fields, while 500 female donkeys provided for his household's every need. His household was so large that it took hundreds of servants to manage his estate. But Job's greatest treasures were not his flocks or his gold. They were his 7 sons and 3 daughters, 10 children who filled his home with laughter and his heart with pride. Every morning, as the sun painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, Job would rise early to offer burnt offerings for each of his children. "Perhaps," he would whisper to himself, "perhaps my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." Such was his devotion. Such was his fear of the Almighty. Job was the greatest man among all the people of the East. Kings sought his counsel. Merchants traveled from distant lands to learn his wisdom. The poor found refuge in his generosity, and the oppressed discovered justice at his gates. The cosmic courtroom. But unknown to Job, a drama of cosmic proportions was about to unfold. In the heavenly realms, where angels gather like stars in the infinite darkness, the sons of God presented themselves before the Lord. Among them walked Satan, the adversary, the accuser, prowling like a lion seeking whom he may devour. "Where have you come from?" the Lord asked Satan. "From roaming throughout the earth," Satan replied with a voice like grinding stone, "going back and forth on it."
The response that shook heaven. In that moment, time stood still. The universe held its breath. Angels leaned forward from their thrones to see what this man of flesh and blood would do when faced with the unthinkable. Job rose slowly from his seat. His legs trembled beneath him, but his spirit remained unbroken. He tore his robe, the symbol of his status and dignity, and shaved his head in the ancient gesture of mourning. Then, in an act that would echo through eternity, Job fell to the ground in worship, and from his lips came words that would be remembered until the end of time. "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." In all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. The cosmic courtroom fell silent. Satan's accusation lay shattered at his feet, but the adversary was not ready to concede defeat. The second test. When health fails on another day, when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, Satan was among them once again. The Lord asked him the same question. "Where have you come from?" "From roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it," came the familiar reply. "Have you considered my servant Job?" the Lord asked again. "He still maintains his integrity, though you incited me against him to ruin him without any reason." Satan's response revealed the depth of his understanding of human nature. Skin for skin. A man will give all he has for his own life. But now stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face. Permission was granted with one condition. He is in your hands, but you must spare his life. When the body becomes a prison, Satan left the presence of the Lord, and what followed was a torment beyond imagination. From the soles of his feet to the crown of his head, Job was afflicted with painful sores. The man who had once worn robes of finest linen now sat among the ashes, scraping his infected skin with a piece of broken pottery. His appearance became so grotesque that people turned away in horror. The children who once ran to embrace him now fled at his approach. The merchants who had sought his wisdom crossed the street to avoid him. Job became a living ghost, breathing but not truly alive. Even his own wife, watching her husband's agony day after day, reached her breaking point. "Are you still maintaining your integrity?" she asked with bitter sarcasm. "Curse God and die." But Job looked at her with eyes that had seen beyond the veil of human understanding and replied, "You are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" In all this, Job did not sin in what he said. The friends who weren't. When 3 of Job's friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, heard about all the troubles that had come upon him, they set out from their homes and met together by agreement to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. But when they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. They began to weep aloud, tearing their robes and sprinkling dust on their heads. For 7 days and 7 nights, they sat on the ground with him, and no one said a word to him because they saw how great his suffering was. But when they finally spoke, their words brought more pain than comfort. They became prosecutors instead of consolers, judges instead of friends. They insisted that Job's suffering must be the result of some secret sin, some hidden wickedness that had finally caught up with him. "Remember," said Eliphaz with the confidence of the self-righteous, "whoever perished being innocent? Or where were the upright ever cut off? Even as I have seen, those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same." Bildad was equally certain. Does God pervert judgment? Or does the Almighty pervert justice? If your sons have sinned against him, he has cast them away for their transgression. And Zophar delivered what he thought was the final verdict. "Know therefore that God exacts from you less than your iniquity deserves." The cry of the innocent. But Job knew his own heart. He knew his own life. And in some of the most powerful poetry ever written, he cried out against the injustice he was experiencing. "Oh, that my words were recorded, that they were written on a scroll, that they were inscribed with an iron tool on lead, or engraved in rock forever. I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will stand on the earth. And after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. I myself will see him with my own eyes, I and not another. How my heart yearns within me." This was not the cry of a man who had lost his faith. This was the declaration of someone who had found faith that transcended circumstances, hope that endured beyond understanding. The voice from the whirlwind. For 37 chapters, the debate raged. Job defended his integrity while his friends attacked it. The arguments grew more intense, the accusations more bitter, until finally Job issued a challenge that would echo through the heavens. "Oh, that I had someone to hear me. I sign now my defense. Let the Almighty answer me." And then, when it seemed that heaven itself had gone silent, when it appeared that God had abandoned his servant to face his accusers alone, the impossible happened. The Lord answered Job out of the storm. "Who is this that obscures my plans with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man, I will question you and you shall answer me." What followed was not an explanation, but an examination. Not answers, but questions that revealed the vast chasm between human understanding and divine wisdom. "Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? On what were its footings set? Or who laid its cornerstone while the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy?" Question after question poured forth like a mighty river, each one revealing the infinite complexity of creation, the intricate beauty of divine design, the mysterious ways in which the Almighty governs the universe. Have you ever given orders to the morning, or shown the dawn its place? Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades? Can you loosen Orion's belt? Do you know the laws of the heavens? The moment of truth. Faced with the overwhelming majesty of God's presence and the infinite scope of his wisdom, Job found himself speechless. The man who had eloquently defended his case for 37 chapters now had only these words, "I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I have no answer. Twice, but I will say no more." But God was not finished. In a second speech, even more powerful than the first, he continued to reveal the mysteries of his creation, the wonders of his works, the incredible complexity of the world he had made. Finally, Job understood. This was never about getting answers to his questions. This was about discovering who asks the questions. This was not about solving the problem of suffering, but about encountering the God who is infinitely greater than any problem. I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. You asked, "Who is this that obscures my plans without knowledge?" Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. And then came the words that would transform everything. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. The restoration that exceeds all hope. The story could have ended there, with Job humbled and silenced before the majesty of the Almighty. But God's character demanded something more, not just justice, but mercy beyond measure. After Job had prayed for his friends, those same friends who had tormented him with their accusations, the Lord restored his fortunes and gave him twice as much as he had before. 14,000 sheep instead of 7,000. 6,000 camels instead of 3,000. 1,000 yoke of oxen instead of 500. 2,000 donkeys instead of 500. His brothers and sisters and former friends came to comfort him, and each gave him a piece of silver and a gold ring. But the greatest restoration was yet to come. Job was blessed with 7 more sons and 3 more daughters. The daughters were the most beautiful women in all the land, and Job gave them inheritance along with their brothers, an act of extraordinary generosity in that ancient culture. Job lived 140 years after his restoration, long enough to see his children and their children to the 4th generation. When he finally died, he was old and full of years, surrounded by those he loved and having witnessed God's faithfulness through the darkest valley and into the brightest dawn. The message that changes everything. The book of Job is not primarily about suffering, though suffering fills its pages.
Chapter 6. The Prophecies of the End Times. During his celestial journey, Enoch received prophetic visions about the future of humanity. He saw the flood that would purify the earth, but also contemplated a golden age that would come after great tribulation. In the last days, the righteous would be vindicated and the wicked would face final judgment. After these things, in the 10th month of the 19th year of Jared, I, Enoch, was born, he wrote, and I lived 82 years in ignorance. But after this time, I received visions and learned all things through the visions of heaven. Enoch prophesied about the coming of the Messiah. And behold, he comes with 10,000s of his saints to execute judgment upon all, and to convict all the ungodly of all their ungodly deeds, which they have ungodly committed. Chapter 7. The Preserved Knowledge. For 40 days, Enoch dictated 366 books to his son Methuselah, preserving all celestial knowledge for future generations. These writings contained not only prophecies, but also knowledge about astronomy, medicine, agriculture, and calendars. The book revealed that there were 364 days in the solar year, divided into 4 seasons of 91 days each. Each season was ruled by a celestial leader who controlled the winds, rains, and seasons of the year. Chapter 8. The Impact in 2026. When the complete manuscripts were discovered in 2026, the academic and religious world was shaken to its foundations. Enoch's prophecies about events of the last 2,000 years proved surprisingly accurate. His descriptions of advanced technology, air travel, and spiritual warfare resonated with contemporary events. Scientists were perplexed to discover that Enoch's astronomical descriptions, written more than 3,000 years ago, were more accurate than many modern calculations. His observations about the solar calendar of 364 days contradicted the lunar systems of 360 days used by ancient civilizations. Theologians debated intensely about the implications of Enoch's intercession for the fallen angels and his detailed descriptions of divine judgments. Churches divided between those who embraced the newly discovered texts and others who considered them apocryphal. Chapter 9. The Transformation of Humanity. The impact of Enoch's complete manuscripts transcended academic circles. Millions of people around the world began to question their understanding of spirituality, the origin of humanity, and eternal destiny. The details about the Watchers and their influence on human civilization offered explanations for questions that had tormented humanity for millennia. Study groups formed on all continents, analyzing every word of the 366 books dictated by Enoch. Archaeologists intensified excavations on Mount Hermon, searching for physical evidence of the Watchers' pact. Chapter 10: The Final Awakening. In 2026, 3 years after the initial discovery, the last fragments were translated. These contained the most specific prophecies about the final events of human history. Enoch had not only predicted the discovery of his own writings, but also described with precise details how humanity would react to these revelations. "In the final time," wrote Enoch, "when my books are completely revealed, there will be great division among men. Some will embrace the light and prepare for the days that are to come. Others will harden themselves even more, denying the evidence before their eyes." Enoch's narrative ended with a promise of hope. "But for those who seek truth with sincere hearts, I will reveal even greater mysteries. For the end of all things approaches, but also the beginning of an era of unprecedented glory." Epilogue: The Eternal Legacy. The Book of Enoch, complete in its original form, became the catalyst for an unprecedented global spiritual awakening. Its influence in 2026 marked the beginning of a new era of understanding about divine nature, celestial realms, and the destiny of humanity. Enoch's words, preserved through millennia, finally found their intended audience, a generation ready to receive truths that their ancestors were not prepared to understand. And thus, the seventh from Adam continued his celestial ministry, guiding humanity through revelations that would forever transform our understanding of who we are and where we are going.